Listen, I need you to understand something that's happening right now in your life, and I mean right this very second. There's someone whose entire world has reorganized itself around one singular truth. Being close to you matters more than anything else they've ever wanted. I'm not talking about casual interest. I'm not describing someone who's mildly attracted or conveniently available. I'm speaking about a person whose internal compass has recalibrated completely, and every single needle points toward you. They're willing to cross lines they never imagined crossing. Boundaries they once considered sacred, they're reconsidering them. Rules they lived by, they're rewriting them. The careful, calculated version of themselves that played it safe and kept appropriate distance, that person is dissolving because the pull toward you is stronger than their need for self-protection. If this resonates with what you're experiencing right now, go ahead and drop a heart in the comments. Let me know you're here. Let me know this is speaking to your reality. What I'm witnessing in the spiritual atmosphere around your connection is extraordinary. This isn't about someone who's just interested or intrigued. This is about someone who has reached a point of absolute clarity about what matters to them, and that clarity has your name written all over it. They've done the math in their mind 1,000 times, calculating risk, measuring consequences, weighing what they might lose against what they might gain, and every single calculation leads them to the same conclusion: you're worth it. All of it. You might have noticed changes in their behavior. Maybe they're showing up in places they wouldn't normally be. Maybe they're initiating conversations that feel deeper, more vulnerable than before. Maybe they're asking questions that reveal they've been paying attention to details about your life that most people miss. These aren't coincidences. These are deliberate choices made by someone who has decided that proximity to you is more valuable than comfort, more important than maintaining appearances, more necessary than protecting themselves from potential rejection or pain. Here's what makes this specific moment in your story so powerful. They're not waiting for perfect conditions anymore. They're not sitting back hoping circumstances will magically align to make connection easier or less complicated. They've reached a threshold where the cost of staying distant has become greater than the risk of moving closer. And when a person crosses that threshold, when someone decides that being near you matters more than being safe, everything changes. Some of you know exactly who I'm talking about. You've felt the shift. You've noticed the intensity. You've recognized that something fundamental has changed in how this person relates to you, how they look at you, how they respond to your presence or even your absence. Others of you might be surprised by what's unfolding behind the scenes, movements happening in the spiritual realm before they manifest in the physical, intentions forming in someone's heart before they found the courage or the words to express them. But whether you're aware of every detail or just beginning to sense that something significant is stirring, I want you to stay with me through this message. What I'm about to share will give you language for what you're experiencing, clarity about what's happening, and wisdom about how to navigate this intensity with grace and discernment. Before I go further, I want to honor those of you who support this channel through Super Thanks. Your generosity allows me to dedicate the time and energy required to create these in-depth messages. If this content is speaking to your soul, blessing your journey, or providing the confirmation you needed, I invite you to consider showing your support. It's never required, but it's always deeply appreciated, and it helps me continue this work. Now, let's dive into the truth about what's happening between you and this person. Let's talk about the forces at work, the spiritual dynamics in play, and what it means when someone decides that nothing, absolutely nothing, will keep them from being close to you. Asterisk, the person I'm describing isn't operating from a place of whim or fleeting attraction. They've crossed into territory that changes everything, absolute determination. And I need you to understand what that actually means, because this isn't the kind of determination that shows up and then fades when obstacles appear. This is the kind of resolve that gets stronger every time it's tested. They wake up thinking about you. Not in the casual way someone might remember a pleasant conversation or a nice interaction. I'm talking about the kind of thinking where you're the first, conscious thought that enters their mind when they open their eyes. Before they check their phone, before they process what day it is or what they need to accomplish, there you are present in their awareness like breath, like heartbeat, like something so fundamental they can't imagine functioning without it. Throughout their day, you're woven into everything. They're in a meeting at work, and something someone says reminds them of a conversation they had with you, or a comment you made, or a perspective you shared. They're running errands and they see something, a book, a piece of music, an item in a store window, and their immediate thought is, they would love this, or I need to tell them about this. Their world has become a collection of moments that either include you or make them wish you were there. At night, when everything is quiet and they're alone with their thoughts, that's when it hits them most powerfully. The full weight of what they feel. The absolute certainty that they need you in their life in a way that transcends casual connection. They lie there processing the magnitude of it, this pull toward you that doesn't diminish with time or distance. This need for your presence that only seems to intensify the more they try to rationalize it or moderate it. Here's what's happening on a deeper level. They've stopped fighting what they feel. There was probably a period, maybe weeks, maybe months, where they tried to talk themselves out of this. They listed all the reasons why pursuing closeness with you was complicated or inconvenient or risky. They reminded themselves of potential obstacles. They attempted to redirect their attention toward easier options, simpler situations, connections that didn't require them to be so vulnerable or invested, but none of it worked. The pull toward you wasn't something they could logic their way out of or discipline themselves past. It is bigger than their attempts to control it. And at some point, they surrendered to that reality. They stopped trying to diminish what they feel and started asking themselves a different question. What would it take to actually be close to them? What would I need to do, to change, to risk, to overcome? That shift from resistance to determination is what you're feeling now. That's the energy that's changed between you. When someone stops fighting their desire for connection and starts strategizing how to create it, everything about their presence shifts. They become more intentional, more focused, more willing to take actions they would have avoided before. And here's the part that might surprise you. They're not actually afraid of rejection anymore. I know that sounds counterintuitive. You might think, of course they're afraid of rejection, who wouldn't be? But here's what's true. When someone reaches this level of clarity about what they want, the fear of rejection gets absorbed into a larger framework. They've already accepted that pursuing you might not work out. They've already processed the possibility of disappointment or loss. And they've decided that the regret of not trying would be worse than the pain of trying and failing. That's a kind of fearlessness that only comes when someone has touched something real in themselves, when they've discovered what they actually value beyond comfort or ego protection or maintaining. A carefully curated version of who they are. You've awakened something in them that's more authentic than the self they present to the world. And once a person touches that level of truth about what they want and who they want it with, they become unstoppable. Think about what that means practically. It means when there are obstacles between you, physical distance, complicated circumstances, conflicting schedules, different life stages, whatever the barriers might be, they're not seeing those obstacles as stop signs. They're seeing them as puzzles to solve, challenges to navigate, temporary conditions that can be changed with creativity and persistence. It means when there's competition for your attention or affection, they're not backing down politely. They're showing up more fully, more authentically, more consistently than anyone else in the picture. not in an aggressive or disrespectful way, but with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what they're there for, and refusing to play small about it. It means when fear or doubt or insecurity tries to make them second-guess this pursuit, they're moving forward anyway. They're not waiting until they feel perfectly confident or until circumstances feel perfectly safe. They're acting from a place of commitment that exists independent of how they feel moment to moment. Can you see what I'm describing? Can you recognize this energy in your actual experience with this person? If you're nodding your head right now, if you're seeing their face in your mind as I describe this, go ahead and type "I see this" in the comments. Let me know this is landing. Because what I want you to understand is that when someone operates at this level of determination, they're not just interested in you, they're invested in creating an actual future that includes you in a meaningful way. They're not entertaining the idea of closeness. They're actively constructing the bridge that will bring you together. And they're not looking for reasons why it won't work. They're identifying every possible path that might work and pursuing all of them simultaneously until something breaks through. This is what it looks like when someone decides you're not optional in their life story. This is the energy of a person who has moved beyond hoping for connection and into actively creating it, regardless of what they have to cross, change, or challenge to make it happen. ***. Now I need to take you deeper into what's actually happening beneath the surface, because there are layers to this person's experience that will help you understand the full picture of what's unfolding. First, let's talk about the internal revolution they've undergone, because what you're witnessing in their external behavior, the increased contact, the intensified attention, the willingness to cross boundaries, that's actually the outward expression of a profound internal transformation. Something has shifted in how they see themselves, how they see you, and how they see what's possible between you. There was a version of them that existed before this shift. That version had certain rules about relationships, certain expectations about how connection should develop, certain limits on how much of themselves they were willing to offer or risk. They probably had clear ideas about what they wanted their life to look like, what kind of relationship they were open to, what they were and weren't willing to compromise on. You've disrupted all of that. Not because you tried to or because you manipulated anything, but simply by being who you are. Your presence in their life has functioned like a catalyst triggering a reaction that's changed the entire chemical composition of their inner world. Suddenly the rules they lived by feel arbitrary. The expectations that once seemed non-negotiable feel flexible. The limits they set feel less like wisdom and more like fear-based restrictions they're ready to transcend. They're experiencing you as someone who makes them want to be braver than they've been, more authentic than they've allowed themselves to be, more vulnerable than they thought they could survive being. And that's intoxicating. That's transformative. That's the kind of influence that doesn't just create attraction, it creates evolution. Pay attention to this. They're not trying to change you or fit you into some predetermined slot in their life. What's happening is the opposite. They're changing themselves, reshaping their life, reevaluating their priorities, all in response to who you are and what you've helped them realize they actually want. You're not being asked to conform to their world. Their world is reorganizing itself around the possibility of including you. This might show up in surprising ways. Maybe they're making different choices about their career because they're thinking about what would make proximity to you more feasible. Maybe they're having conversations with people in their life family, friends, colleagues that set the stage for your eventual integration into their world. Maybe they're addressing personal issues or healing old wounds because they want to show up for you as the healthiest, most whole version of themselves possible. These aren't small adjustments. These are fundamental reorientations of their life trajectory, and they're making them willingly, even eagerly, because the version of their future That includes you feels more authentic and more alive than any version that doesn't. Now let's talk about how they think about boundaries. Because this is where the crossing every line part of your title becomes especially significant. Every person has boundaries, those invisible lines that mark where their comfort zone ends, where their vulnerability begins, where they've decided they won't go because the risk feels too great. And normally, these boundaries are protective. They exist for good reasons. They keep people safe from hurt, disappointment, overextension, or exploitation. But here's what's happening with this person. They're doing a cost-benefit analysis of those boundaries in relation to you. And they're realizing that the very protection those boundaries offer is also what's keeping them from what they actually want most. The boundary that keeps them safe from rejection is also the boundary that keeps them from connection. The line that protects them from disappointment is also the line that prevents them from joy. The limit that guards them from vulnerability is also the limit that stops them from intimacy. And they're choosing you over safety. They're choosing the possibility of deep connection over the guarantee of shallow protection. They're deciding that the worst-case scenario of pursuing you and it not working out is still better than the guaranteed regret of never trying. This doesn't mean they're being reckless or foolish. What I'm describing isn't someone throwing all wisdom to the wind in a moment of emotional overwhelm. This is actually the opposite. This is someone who has become so clear about what matters that they're willing to be strategic, patient, and persistent in ways they never have been before. They're not rushing blindly forward. They're moving deliberately, thoughtfully, but absolutely certainly toward you. Here's an example of what this might look like in real life. Maybe there's always been an unspoken rule between you about how often you communicate or how deep your conversations go. They're pushing past that. Not in a way that feels invasive or disrespectful, but in a way that says, I'm not content with surface level anymore. I want to know you. Really know you. And I want you to really know me. Or maybe there's been a physical distance between you, different cities, different countries, different social circles that don't naturally overlap. They're actively working to close that distance. They're finding reasons to be where you are. They're creating opportunities for interaction that didn't exist before. They're treating geographic separation as a logistics problem to solve rather than an insurmountable obstacle. Or perhaps there have been social or relational complications. Maybe one or both of you have had other connections. Maybe there are friend groups that would have opinions. Maybe there are family dynamics that make things complex. They're navigating all of that with a kind of determination that says, I'll handle the complications. I'll have the difficult conversations. I'll do whatever it takes to create space for us. Do you see what I'm showing you? This is someone who has moved from passive hoping to active pursuing, from wishing things were different to making things different, from wanting closeness to creating closeness through deliberate, sustained action. And here's the spiritual dimension. I need you to understand, when someone reaches this level of clarity and commitment about another person, there's a spiritual alignment that happens. It's like they've tuned into a frequency that's specifically yours, and now they're receiving guidance, opportunities, and confirmation that's pointing them toward you. Synchronicities start happening. Doors that seemed closed begin to open. Conversations that needed to happen suddenly unfold naturally. Obstacles that looked permanent start dissolving. This isn't magic, and it's not manipulation. It's what happens when human will aligns with authentic desire and spiritual truth. The universe, God, source, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, tends to support movements toward genuine connection, toward authentic love, toward relationships that help people become more of who they really are. And what this person feels for you falls into that category. They're not chasing you because they're lonely or bored or looking for validation. They're pursuing you because something in their soul recognized something in yours. And that recognition has awakened a kind of knowing that transcends logic or convenience. They understand at a level deeper than thought that you're meant to be in their life. And they're honoring that understanding with everything they've got. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of this, I want you to type "overwhelming" in the comments. Because it's okay to acknowledge that being pursued with this kind of determination can feel like a lot. It's okay to need time to process what it means, to discern whether this is what you want, to figure out how to respond with wisdom and clarity. But I also want you to consider this. How often in life does someone look at you and decide you're worth crossing lines for? How rare is it to be seen with such clarity that another person is willing to risk comfort, challenge convention, and pursue connection even when it would be easier not to? This kind of determination isn't common. This level of commitment doesn't happen casually. When someone shows up for you like this, it's worth paying attention to what that means and what it's inviting you to consider about your own desires and your own willingness to let connection in. Because here's something crucial. Their determination creates an invitation, but it doesn't eliminate your agency. You still get to choose. You still get to discern. You still get to decide at what pace and in what way you open yourself to what they're offering. Their crossing lines to be close to you doesn't mean you're obligated to receive them, but it does mean you're being given an opportunity to experience a kind of pursuit that many people spend their whole lives hoping for, but never actually receiving. What I need you to understand now, and this is the core truth that changes everything, is what this person's determination reveals about the nature of your connection and about what's actually possible between you. Most relationships develop within established patterns. Two people meet, there's mutual interest. They follow socially acceptable scripts for how attraction unfolds. They take turns initiating contact. They carefully calibrate how much vulnerability to show and when. The relationship grows incrementally, cautiously, with both parties protecting themselves and testing the waters before committing more deeply. It's measured. It's balanced. It's safe. What's happening between you and this person has broken out of that pattern entirely. And I want you to recognize what a rare and powerful thing that is, because it indicates something about the quality and the potential of this connection that goes far beyond ordinary relationship dynamics. When someone is willing to cross every line just to be close to you, what they're actually saying is, you're worth more to me than my patterns. You matter more than my protection mechanisms. This connection is more real than my fear. That level of recognition doesn't happen because someone is impulsive or desperate. It happens because they've touched something in you, and you've touched something in them that registers at the deepest level of human experience, soul recognition. That's what this is. I know that phrase might sound mystical or overly romantic to some of you, but I'm using it deliberately because it's the most accurate description for what occurs when two people connect at a level that transcends personality, circumstance, or convenience. This person's soul has recognized yours as significant, as necessary, as meant to be part of their journey in a way that can't be reasoned away or ignored. And when soul recognition happens, normal rules stop applying. The careful calculations that govern ordinary relationships. Is this appropriate timing? What will people think? Am I being too forward? Should I protect myself more? Those calculations become secondary to a deeper imperative. Honor what's true. Follow what's real. Move toward what matters. This is why they're willing to cross lines. Not because they've lost their judgment or abandoned their values, but because they've discovered something that matters more than maintaining the status quo. They've found someone new who makes evolution feel necessary and possible and worth whatever it costs. Now, I want to address something important here, because when I talk about someone crossing every line to be close to you, some of you might have concerns. Is this healthy? Is this obsessive? Should I be worried about this level of intensity? These are valid questions. And discernment is always wise. So let me be clear about what I'm describing and what I'm not describing. I'm not talking about someone who's ignoring your boundaries, disregarding your stated wishes, or pursuing you in ways that feel invasive or disrespectful. That's not determination, that's disrespect. And it's not what's happening in the scenario I'm addressing. What I'm describing is someone who is crossing their own internal lines, the self-imposed boundaries that have kept them playing small or playing safe. They're challenging their own limitations, not yours. They're pushing past their own fears, not your clearly stated boundaries. They're expanding what they're willing to risk and offer, not violating what you've asked them to honor. There's a crucial difference, and your own intuition knows which one you're experiencing. If this person's pursuit feels honoring, if it feels like they're showing up with respect for who you are and what you need, if their intensity comes with consciousness about your agency and your timing, then what you're experiencing is healthy determination. If it feels pressuring, manipulative, or like your no isn't being heard, that's something different entirely. And you need to respond to it differently. But for those of you who are experiencing the first kind, who are being pursued by someone who honors you even as they're showing up powerfully, I want you to understand the gift that's being offered. Because what this person is actually giving you is permission to want more too. Permission to hope for the kind of connection that doesn't play by normal rules. Permission to imagine that maybe, just maybe, something extraordinary is possible in your relational life. So many people settle. They accept lukewarm interest because it's available. They convince themselves that measured, cautious connection is the mature approach. They talk themselves out of wanting the kind of love that's willing to cross lines and take risks and show up with unwavering determination. They decide that kind of thing doesn't really exist, or that it's only for other people, or that it's not practical in real adult life, and then someone comes along who refuses to settle where you're concerned. Someone who looks at all the reasons why pursuing you is complicated and says, I don't care. You're worth navigating complications for. Someone who experiences the fear of rejection or failure and says, I'm doing this anyway because the alternative, not trying, is worse. That person is offering you proof that the kind of love you might have stopped believing in or hoping for actually exists. And they're not just offering it as an abstract concept, they're offering it to you. Specifically, because of who you are, because of what they see in you, because of the way you make them feel alive and authentic and brave. Can you receive that? Can you let that truth land in your heart? Type, I receive this if you're ready to acknowledge what's being offered here. Because here's what happens when you receive this level of pursuit, with openness rather than skepticism. You start to believe different things are possible for your life. You start to imagine that maybe you don't have to accept less than what you actually want. You start to consider that perhaps your deepest desires for connection aren't naive or unrealistic. They're actually available to you with someone who sees you clearly and chooses you decisively. This person's determination is activating something in you too. It's waking up your own courage. It's challenging you to examine whether you've been playing it too safe, protecting yourself so carefully that you've closed off possibility, hiding behind your own boundaries when what you really want is to experience the vulnerability and the intensity of being truly seen and truly chosen. They're not just crossing lines to get to you. They're inviting you to cross some lines too, the lines between fear and trust, between self-protection and openness, between the small story you've been telling yourself about what's possible and the larger story that wants to unfold if you let it. And this brings me to the prophetic aspect of this message, because I need you to hear what Spirit is saying through this situation. This person's pursuit isn't happening by accident or by force of will alone. There's a divine element to the timing and the intensity of what's unfolding. You're being given an opportunity not just to be loved or pursued, but to step into a version of yourself that knows how to receive love, that believes you're worth this kind of devotion, that can hold space for powerful connection without diminishing it or running from it. The spiritual assignment here isn't just about whether you say yes to this person. It's about whether you say yes to yourself, to the part of you that wants deep connection, that's tired of surface-level interactions, that knows you're capable of being in relationship with someone who sees you fully and loves you powerfully. If this content has touched something deep in your soul, if you're feeling emotionally moved by what I'm sharing, I want to invite you to show your support through Super Thanks. What you're receiving here is more than information, it's activation. It's affirmation, it's spiritual ministry, and when you support this work, you're helping me continue creating these deep, prophetic messages for people who need them. If you've been blessed, please consider blessing back. Now let's talk about what all of this means for how you navigate what's ahead. Because understanding what's happening is only half of the equation. The other half is knowing how to respond with wisdom, discernment, and courage. So what do you do with this information? How do you navigate being pursued by someone whose determination to be close to you is absolute? How do you honor both what they're offering and what you need? Let me give you practical wisdom for this moment. Get honest about what you actually want. This is the first and most important step, because you can't navigate this wisely if you're not clear about your own desires. This person has made their position clear, they want closeness with you, and they're willing to cross lines to achieve it. But what do you want? I'm not asking what you think you should want, or what would be easiest, or what other people would approve of. I'm asking what your soul is actually longing for when you're honest with yourself in those quiet moments when no one else's opinion matters. Do you want this connection too? Does this person's presence in your life feel like something you want to expand, or something you're not sure about, or something that doesn't align with your actual desires? You need clarity here, because if you want what they want, if you're feeling the pull too, but you've been holding back out of fear or propriety or uncertainty, then their determination might be exactly what you need to give yourself permission to step forward. But if you're genuinely uncertain, or if you know in your heart that this isn't the right connection for you, then their intensity doesn't change that truth. Your clarity about what you want has to be the foundation for how you respond. Spend time in honest reflection. Journal about it. Talk to trusted friends who know you well enough to help you access your truth rather than just tell you what to do. Pray about it or meditate on it if that's part of your practice. But get clear, because this situation is asking for a level of honesty that you might have been avoiding. Test their determination through transparency. One of the most powerful things you can do when someone is pursuing you with intensity is to be completely honest about where you are, what you're feeling, and what you need. This serves two purposes. It honors them with the truth, and it reveals whether their determination is actually about you or about the chase. If this person is truly determined to be close to you, the real you, not some idealized version, then your transparency about your doubts, your needs, your complications, your authentic self will not scare them away. It will actually deepen their resolve because they'll see it as you trusting them with truth. But if their pursuit is more about the pursuit itself and about genuine connection with who you actually are, then transparency will cause them to recalibrate or back off. So tell them where you are. If you're interested but cautious, say that. If you're drawn to them but scared, say that. If you need time to process what's happening, say that. If there are specific concerns or complications that need to be addressed, bring them into the light. Don't perform certainty or ease if that's not what you're feeling. Let them pursue the real you, complete with all your complexity and uncertainty. Honor your own pace while respecting their pursuit. Just because someone is willing to move quickly or intensely doesn't mean you have to match their speed. Your pace is valid. Your need for time, for processing, for gradual unfolding, that's all legitimate, and it doesn't diminish the value of what's possible between you at the same time. Recognize that their determination means they're not going to disappear just because you need to move more slowly. They've decided you're worth waiting for, worth being patient with, worth showing up for consistently, even if the timeline isn't what they'd prefer. You can honor their pursuit while also setting the pace that feels right for you. This might sound like, I see how much this connection means to you, and I'm honored by that. I'm also someone who needs time to process big emotional shifts, and what's happening between us is significant. I need you to know that my slower pace doesn't mean I'm not interested. It means I'm taking this seriously enough to move thoughtfully. Examine what boundaries actually serve you. Remember earlier when I talked about how this person is reconsidering their own boundaries in light of what they want with you? You might need to do the same thing. Some of your boundaries are wisdom. They protect you from genuine harm. They honor your values. They create space for what matters most to you. But some of your boundaries might actually be fear in disguise. They're not protecting anything real. They're just keeping you small and safe and alone. Ask yourself, what lines have I drawn that are actually keeping me from connection? What rules am I following that don't serve my deepest desires? What would it mean to be brave enough to let someone cross the distance I've created around my heart? This doesn't mean abandoning all boundaries. Healthy boundaries are essential. But it does mean being honest about which boundaries are protective and which are preventative. If someone worthy is offering to get close to you, make sure you're not keeping them at arm's length out of habit rather than wisdom. Watch their consistency over time. Determination in a moment is one thing. Determination sustained over time, through obstacles and waiting and the mundane work of actually building connection, that's something else entirely. As this unfolds, pay attention to whether this person's resolve is consistent. Do they show up when it's inconvenient? Do they stay engaged when the excitement of pursuit fades into the dailiness of relationship? Do they follow through on what they say they'll do? Do they demonstrate through action, not just words, that their commitment to closeness with you is real and sustainable? Anyone can be intense for a season. What you're looking for is someone whose determination transforms into devotion, whose pursuit matures into partnership, whose passion is matched by persistence. Time will reveal whether this person's crossing of lines is a flash of intensity or a fundamental reorientation of how they want to live their life. Communicate your non-negotiables clearly. There's a difference between being flexible about boundaries and abandoning your core values. As you navigate this person's pursuit, make sure you're crystal clear about what's truly non-negotiable for you. What matters so much that you're not willing to compromise it, even for someone who's showing up powerfully? What values, needs, or commitments are non-optional? Name these things to yourself and to them. This protects you from getting swept up in intensity and later realizing you've compromised something essential. And it also gives this person clear information about what honoring you actually requires. If they're genuinely determined to be close to you, they'll respect and work within your non-negotiables. If they pressure you to violate what's core to who you are, that tells you something important about whether this connection is actually healthy. Create space for mystery and emergence. You don't have to figure everything out right now. You don't have to know exactly where this is going or have clarity about every dimension of what's unfolding. Part of honoring what's happening is allowing it to unfold rather than trying to control or predict or force it into familiar shapes. This person's determination has created momentum. But momentum doesn't mean you have to rush toward a destination. You can be present with what's emerging without having to name it or define it or commit to a specific outcome yet. You can say yes to exploring connection without saying yes to everything all at once. Give yourself and this person permission to not have all the answers. Some of the most beautiful relationships emerge through a process of discovery, where both people are brave enough to be in the unknown together, where certainty comes through experience rather than analysis, where trust builds through showing up for each other, in real moments rather than through perfect clarity about the future. Check in with your body and your intuition. Your mind might be spinning with thoughts about this situation, but your body and your intuition are giving you information too. How does your body feel when you're around this person or thinking about them? Does their intensity make you feel energized or depleted? Does their pursuit feel expansive or contracting? Does something in your gut say, yes, this is right? Or is there a whisper of something's off here? Don't override your intuitive knowing with logical arguments or external pressure. If your body is signaling discomfort or warning, pay attention to that even if you can't fully articulate why. And if your body is signaling excitement and openness and rightness, pay attention to that too. Even if your mind is spinning up reasons to be cautious, your intuition knows things your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Trust it as a valuable source of guidance as you navigate this connection. Now, who needed to hear this guidance today? Who's navigating this exact situation and needed someone to give them language for how to respond? Drop "This is me" in the comments if these application steps are speaking directly to your reality.